Okay, so just a quick revision. In the last video, we started with trait approach to personality, and we did two theories that belong to trait approach. One was Alport's trait approach, and one was Cattell's trait approach. What Alport said was that when you want to describe understand a person's personality, there are basically three kinds of traits that you have to understand and describe about the person. One is the cardinal trait, central trait, and secondary trait. Cardinal trait, very quickly, are those overgeneralized kind of traits which define your entire persona, your entire being, the reason for your existence. It defines who you are in a very vague or general way. So like Mahatma Gandhi was defined by his funda of non-violence. Similarly, there are other peoples, Mother Teresa through her charity, and henceforth. Central traits are those traits which we usually use when we are describing other people, like honest, friendly, sociable, etc. And secondary traits are very specific details about that person, about how that particular person reacts or is in a particular situation or in a given context, or specific details like what exactly the person likes. For example, the favorite color is red, or loves to eat mangoes, but only if they are sweet. Okay, so those kinds of traits about your personality would come under secondary traits. Then we came to Cattell's personality theory, which is also known as the 16 personality factor theory. So Cattell talked more about source traits, which are the building blocks of a person's personality, and they combine together to form surface traits. Okay, so he talked about 16 source traits, so that is why his theory is known as 16 personality factor theory. What I forgot to mention in the last video is there is actually a personality questionnaire, a personality test, which is known as 16 PF questionnaire, 16 personality factor questionnaire, that has been designed on the basis of this theory to test the personality of individuals based on Cattell's theory. Okay, so today in this video we'll be talking about another very important theory of personality, which comes under the category of trait approach, and that is Eyesenck's personality theory. Okay, so what did Eyesenck said? Eyesenck said if you wanted to understand people's personality, you could basically do that if you had informations on three basic dimensions. Okay, so he described three basic dimensions of personality, and he said it's more like if you would just understand where the person stands in these three dimensions, you would know exactly what the person is like. So the first dimension that he talked about was neuroticism versus emotional stability. So this dimension talks about what degree of emotional stability does a person show. What is emotional stability? It is our ability to control our own emotions. Okay, so neuroticism and emotional stability are two different extremes of on a single continuum. So people on one extreme who are considered neurotic, they are overly sensitive, too touchy, they they start panicking very quickly, they get stressed out very quickly, they cannot control their own emotions very easily. Okay, so they are considered as neurotic people. On the other extreme, emotionally stable people are very calm, cool, relaxed, even tempered. They are very good at handling and managing their own emotions. Okay, so by knowing where a person stands on this line, on this continuum, where one extreme is a highly neurotic individual and the other extreme is an emotionally stable individual, by knowing where you lie in this dimension, we come to know a very important aspect of your personality. Okay, so that was the first dimension that Eyesenck talked about, emotional stability versus neuroticism. The second dimension that he talked about, which is very important to know about a person, is introversion versus extroversion. So we've already talked about it. This talks about how sociable a person is. So at one extreme we have a highly introvert person, and at the other extreme we have a highly extroverted person. Introvert people are shy, they like to keep by themselves, they don't like to be in too much in the company of others, they avoid events or places which are crowded by people, they function best and they are happy when they are left to do their work in peace and quiet by themselves. Okay, and extroverted people are highly sociable, outgoing, they love company of others, they hate being alone, they will seek out opportunities and put themselves into situations where they will be in company of others. So again, nobody is extremely introverted or extremely extroverted. It's a continuous line, a continuum. By knowing where you stand on this continuum, we can find out another very important thing about your personality. Okay, so the first was neuroticism versus emotional stability. The second was extroversion versus introversion. Initially, he came up with only these two dimensions, but a third dimension was added on later, which was sociability versus psychoticism. Okay, so this talks about your sociability, how well you can relate to other people. Okay, so on one side, people who score really high on psychoticism, they are quite antisocial, hostile, and egocentric people. Okay, they think more about themselves, they don't really care about other people. People who score really high on psychoticism. And on the other side, we have sociable people who are opposite of this. Okay, so they are more empathetic, they are more friendly to others, they are more considerate of other people's feelings and emotions. Okay, so Eyesenck's theory of personality basically describes a person's personality on these three dimensions: neuroticism versus emotional stability, extroversion versus introversion, and psychoticism versus sociability. Okay, and there is an Eyesenck's personality questionnaire that is available, which if you will help us test a person's personality based on Eyesenck's personality theory. Okay, so these are the three main trait approaches that are very common. And right now, if you would ask me, ma'am, which is the best possible approach, or which is the best possible theory to follow, which will give us a very accurate idea about a person's personality as a psychologist, so I would say the most recent research and the most recent work that has come out in the field of personality is the big 5-factor theory of personality. So it combines a little bit from this theory and a little bit of that theory, and basically the big 5-factor theory comes up with 5 basic traits that you can actually describe sum up a person's personality in these 5 different traits. So it's given in the big blue box in your NCERT. It's very important. You have to know these final 5 traits, 5 factors that we actually now use to describe people's personality. Factor 1 is the person's openness to experience. So openness to experience tells us how likely you are to explore, how likely you are to explore new ideas, to come up with something new and creative. Or the people on the other extreme who are not, who score very low on this trait, openness to experience, they're very rigid people. They don't like changes in their life. And the people who score high on openness to experience are explorers, they are creative people, they are out of the box thinkers, and they love going to new places, understanding new people, and they are more open to accepting something new. Okay, so that is openness to experience. Then is emotional stability, okay, or neuroticism that we call. Again, that's been taken from Eyesenck's theory. So factor 2 is your ability to control your emotions. Factor 3 is extroversion, your level of how much do you prefer the company of others. So similarly, there are 5 factors. I want you to read that big blue box and write down a nice set of notes on big factor theory, big 5-factor theory. So finally, now when we explain a person's personality, they are based on these 5 factors. And I'll be asking questions about these 5 factors to you in our next class. Okay?